Hello, all you scaredy cats and kittens, and welcome to the Two Scaredy Cats podcast, where we talk about all things strange, unusual, and paranormal. We're your hostess with the mostest. I'm Stacy, and unfortunately, Kara is not with us this week. She has been busy with a bunch of conventions. She just got back from one, and she's a little bit under the weather. So she will not be joining us because she's leaving again next week for another convention. So she just got back on Tuesday and she leaves again next Wednesday. And she's not feeling well, so she's trying to recoup before she has to go back out again. So it's just little old me today, and that's okay. As you all probably know, I just had been on vacation and we had been in the Great Smoky Mountains. And I thought, since the Smoky Mountains are part of the in Appalachia, and I know everybody seems to really like Appalachian stories, I came across a couple of stories for us to talk about today that have to do with Appalachia. So why don't you sit right back and relax, and let's get started. I'd like to welcome everybody back to the Two Scaredy Cats podcast with our topic for today. I know I've been. Have you ever been deep in the woods and suddenly you realize that everything has gone quiet? There's no birds, you don't hear any insects, there's no leaves rustling, the squirrels aren't active, and it's just complete silence. The kind of silence that makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up because some primitive part of your brain is screaming that something is just not right. Now imagine stepping outside one morning and finding footprints so large that they don't seem human. Then imagine that you're not the only person that witnessed this or sees this. Imagine people are calling 911 because they're convinced something enormous is moving through the woods at night. And then, just as suddenly as it appears, it vanishes. Well, tonight we're heading into the Appalachian foothills of Ohio, where a series of mysterious reports in 2026 left residents with one question on their mind: what was really walking through the woods? So before we get into the sightings themselves, let's talk about Appalachia, because if there's one place in America where strange stories seem to thrive, it's there. The Appalachian Mountains stretch for more than 2,000 miles through the eastern United States. Generations of families have lived in these hills and valleys, passing down stories around campfires, on front porches, and at kitchen tables. Stories about things seen in the woods, things that don't have names, things heard in the dark. Locals often joke that there are two sets of rules in Appalachia. The first is common sense, and the second is if the woods tell you to leave, you leave. Now, whether you believe in paranormal creatures or not, there's something undeniably setting about a dense forest, especially if you're there at night. Trees block the moonlight, every shadow looks like it might be moving, and every snapped twig sounds deliberate or like something's hunting you. And if you're anything like me, the moment I hear something large crashing through the woods after dark, I'm not sticking around to investigate. Especially since there's a lot of bears in Appalachia, as we witnessed when we were on our trip to Gatlinburg, because we had a bear come into our car because we forgot to lock our car doors, and there was a bear that decided he wanted to get into our cars, see if we had any good snacks for it. Unfortunately, we did not, and the bear got out, but lived to tell another story and did not destroy our cars, thank goodness. But anyway, so you got to be careful out there. So in early 2026, reports began surfacing from northeastern Ohio. Now, I don't know if anybody remembers this, but there were a bunch of stories in March and April of this year, and even a little bit into May, of people seeing a large upright creature moving through wooded areas. There were numerous sightings, and a lot of them were around Salt Fork State Park in Ohio here. Several accounts describe something covered in hair, tall, broad shoulders, walking on two legs. Now, if you're skeptical, you're probably already thinking about many investigators thought of first: a bear. And honestly, that's a reasonable explanation because there are black bears can stand up on their hind legs. And I've witnessed that because, I have video of it opening our car door handles on our car. But poor lighting can play tricks on people. And at a great distance, it can distort the size of something and it can make you believe that something else is there than what really is there. So people thought the case was closed of seeing this, huge creature running around in the woods. They all thought it was a bear. But that might not be the case because soon the reports started piling up. Different witnesses in different areas, but they all had similar descriptions of what was going on. Then came reports of unusually large footprints that some witnesses claimed were far larger than any normal human track. That's where things started getting interesting because whether these people were mistaken or not, they genuinely believed that they had seen something unusual, something that they could not explain. So researchers who investigate cryptid sightings have a term for this, and it's called Bigfoot flap. And despite the funny name, it's actually a recognized pattern where the Bigfoot research community. A flap occurs when multiple sightings suddenly appear in a concentrated area over a very short period of time. It's almost like a wave. Reports increase dramatically, people begin talking, witnesses come forward, and then everything stops. The Ohio reports fit that pattern remarkably well. For a brief period, people claimed to be seeing something, then the sightings disappeared. No body, no definite photographs, no captured creature, nothing. Just stories. Now here's where it gets a little tricky. Skeptics argue that once news of a sighting spreads, people become more likely to interpret ordinary events as extraordinary ones. So suddenly, a shadow of a deer or a cat or something becomes exaggerated into being a monster. Suddenly a bear becomes Bigfoot. And a strange sound becomes evidence that Bigfoot is, walking through your forest. And, the noises that you hear are Bigfoot, coming to hang out with you around your property or whatever. And that is certainly possible. But supporters of the sightings point out that many witnesses reported seeing the same general description before the story became widely discussed. There was always a large figure. The figure had dark hair. It was very large, massive inside. It was moving through the woods. Was this a coincidence? Maybe a misidentification. Maybe something else. And that's where the mystery is. So Appalachia is known for its stories about wild men or Bigfoot, the grassman. Like, these are all the same terminology used to describe Bigfoot, but, in different areas, in different states. And these stories have been around for generations. I mean, you've been hearing about Bigfoot since forever. Long before there was a television, long before the internet started, long before anyone ever used the word Bigfoot. Throughout Appalachia, there had always been stories of what some communities called wild men. These hair-covered giants that were forest dwellers, that were large human-like creatures, and they were always seen in very remote parts and regions of the mountain areas. In Ohio specifically, legends developed around a creature known as the Grassman. Witness would describe a large, hairy creature similar to Bigfoot that supposedly inhabited rural woodlands. Some accounts claim that it built nests from tall grass, hence its name, the Grassman. Others described eerie screams echoing through the night. A lot of people also claim that the Grassman has a very noticeable smell to him, and that if you smell the smell that, it means like there's a grass man near you. Whether folklore or reality, these stories have survived for decades. And that's what makes them so compelling. People from completely different backgrounds, from different generations, and from different towns, all somehow keep telling similar versions of the same story. A giant figure in the woods, watching and waiting, always just out of reach or out of sight from us. But not every Appalachian encounter involves a hairy giant. Some are far stranger. One account that gained attention involved a family in the mid-Ohio Valley reported seeing something entirely different. The figure was described as unnaturally thin, extremely tall, human-like or a humanoid, but not quite. The children later drew pictures of what they had seen. Family members claim the drawings look remarkably similar despite being created separately. Weeks later, additional sightings were reported, this time involving glowing yellow eyes seen among the trees. Now let's be clear. This account remains unverified. There is no hard evidence, no photographs, and no scientific proof. But stories like this continue to circulate because they tap into something deeply unsettling. The fear of the unknown or the fear of what may be out there lurking in the woods. Things we aren't supposed to see. Now, I also came across another story on TikTok about a woman who lived in the Appalachian mountains by herself in a home that backs up, I guess, into the mountain area there. And one night she was sitting in her home and she heard a tap on her window. And she realized there's nothing near or around her that could have caused this tap because, she lives in the middle of basically nowhere. And there weren't any trees or anything that were right next to her house that could have been a branch or something that had been blowing from the wind or whatever. So she gets up and she goes look and she doesn't see anything out there. So she sits back down and settles down. Well, she hears the tap again. So she gets up and she looks out the window, and again, she doesn't see anything out there. But this time she kind of stands there and waits a little bit to see, if somebody's messing with her or what might be going on. So she's standing looking out her window, and all of a sudden she looks out towards the forest or that is near her, or the woods that are behind her property. And she sees this very tall, thin, kind of almost white-looking creature, like unusually tall and, really weirdly thin creature that's kind of poking out behind the tree. But here's the weird part. This creature didn't have a face. Where its face should have been, there was nothing. But where its chest was, or in the chest area, she noticed that it had this creepy looking pale kind of face. And it was peeking around the tree looking at her. And she hurried up and she ran. She was divorced and her in-laws lived like right down the road from her, I guess. So she hurried up, hopped in her car and went next door to them and, told them what happened and that. And they went back to see if they could see this creature thing, and it was gone by the time they got back there. But I mean, this is not, there's numerous stories out there about this type of creature that people have been seeing. So what was happening in Ohio during, that strange week and during this strange couple of months? Let's consider the possibilities. Maybe it was all just misidentification. Witnesses saw bears. Maybe they saw shadows, ordinary wildlife that their imagination made into something else. I mean, because let's face it, when you're scared or your head's filled with scary stuff, you start to think that there's things there that are not. And you make up, you think every shadow looks like, something staring at you or, some creature out there. Maybe it was all a hoax. Maybe they were fake footprints. Maybe they were fabricated stories thought up by these people in Ohio, but that one can be kind of debunked because they were from several different areas in Ohio. It wasn't like they were all like neighbors on a street or anything like that. Maybe it was people looking for attention, and that could very well be, today with the internet. When people hear about Bigfoot, everybody gets all excited and stuff, and, maybe they wanted to get in the paper. We don't know. And maybe there's an undiscovered animal roaming remotely in the forest that we don't know about yet. Unlikely, perhaps. Impossible? Not necessarily. Or maybe the stories are touching on something stranger. Something older than the roads and towns that now cut through these mountains. something that generations of people have glimpsed but never fully understood. Personally, I'm not saying that Bigfoot is real. I mean, although there's a lot of evidence out there that points to him being real. But I can tell you one thing. If I found giant footprints outside my house leading into the woods, I would not be following them. Curiosity may have killed the cat, but this scaredy cat is staying alive. So eventually the reports stopped, the sightings faded, the news cycle moved on, and no creature was ever found. No explanation ever answered every question. The footprints disappeared, the witness returned to their normal lives, and whatever people believed they saw simply vanished back into the forest. Maybe there was never anything there at all. Maybe fear created the story, or maybe, just maybe, something really was walking through those Ohio woods. And if that is true, there's no reason to think it couldn't still be there, hiding among the trees, waiting for the next person to notice, the next person to look a little too long into the darkness, and the next person brave enough to ask, "What did I see?" Because one thing is certain, the mountains keep their secrets, and sometimes those secrets walk. All right, so that's all I have for you guys today. I thought that was interesting about the Bigfoot stories that were circulating a couple of months ago. And every now and then you'll hear, Bigfoot stories pop up. He's out there. He's very elusive. That's why they keep making all those shirts say, about how he's good at hiding or whatever. So anyway, join us in 2 weeks for another exciting episode of the Two Scaredy Cats podcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, be sure to follow the show, leave a review, and share this episode with your favorite fellow scaredy cats. Remember, you can find us on YouTube and Instagram. And if you had a strange encounter in the woods, whether it was a cryptid, a ghost, or something you still can't explain to this day, send us your story. We may feature it in a future episode, and we'd love to hear from you. And to all our scaredy cats and kittens out there, remember, curiosity didn't kill these two scaredy cats.